soil was divided among jarls, kings, and dreams of power. He was the half-brother of King Olaf Haraldsson, later called Saint Olaf. Harald carried the blood of kings, but also the burden of a land torn apart. Even as a boy, Harald showed a strength and courage that made people pause in awe. He was tall, powerful, with eyes that burned like fire. It was said he was born to lead men, to guide ships through storms, and to hurl himself into battle where others would falter. But childhood peace was short. Norway was divided, and soon Harald was cast into his first great trial, the Battle of Stiklestad in 1030. There he stood, only 15 winters old, by his brother's side. Swords flashed like lightning, shields crashed like thunder, and the earth turned red with blood. Olaf fell, and Norway was plunged into darkness. For Harald, the defeat meant more than the loss of a brother. It meant exile. Wounded and hunted, he fled eastward, far from the mountains and fjords he called home. Yet in his heart, a fire was kindled, a vow that one day he would return, stronger, greater, and claim Norway as his own. Harald's journey took him through Sweden and into Rus, to Prince Yaroslav in Kiev. There he arrived as a wandering warrior, but soon proved his worth. With sword in hand, always first into battle, he earned respect. No longer a fugitive, Harald became a leader. Yaroslav trusted him, gave him honor and men to command. But Harald's heart thirsted for more, for adventure, wealth, and glory that would make his name echo through time. So he sailed south, to Miklagard, Constantinople, the mighty city where east met west. There Harald entered the famous Varangian Guard, the emperor's own bodyguard. Only the fiercest Norsemen could wield its swords, and Harald soon rose to be among its greatest leaders. He fought in distant lands, in Sicily, in Bulgaria, along the burning coasts of the Mediterranean. He saw cities consumed by flame, he rode across desert sands, and he let his blade sing in dozens of battles. Legends were whispered of Harald. That he scaled city walls alone to open the gates from within. That he was as cunning as he was strong, and never shrank from danger. Gold and silver filled his chests, honor filled his name. In Constantinople, he was known as a man both feared and respected. Yet beneath all the splendor and riches, he still bore the vow, one day he would return home and claim Norway as his own. The years in the east shaped him into more than a warrior. He became a strategist, a commander, a king in all but name. He learned the art of building realms and holding power. But the blood in his veins was still Nordic, still Viking. And the dream of Norway's crown called louder than gold or imperial favor. So after many years in foreign lands, Harald set sail north again. He returned not as a boy fleeing exile, but as a man hardened by fire and iron, rich with gold and rich with tales that few could believe. He came like a storm announcing a new age. And in Norway awaited a nation that would learn Harald Hardrada was not just a man, he was destiny. When Harald set foot on Norwegian soil once more, he was no longer the young boy who had stood beside his brother Olaf at Stiklestad. He was a hardened warrior, shaped by foreign battlefields and the splendor of an emperor's court. He carried enough gold to buy loyalty, and a reputation fierce enough to silence the boldest jarls. Norway was divided, but in Harald's eyes there was certainty, he would unite it under one crown. He joined forces with his nephew Magnus, the good, Olaf's son, who already ruled part of the land. Together they governed, but Harald was not made to stand in another's shadow. When Magnus died, Harald became sole king. And so began an era when Norway would feel the weight of his will. Harald ruled with an iron hand. He was strict, demanding obedience, but he was also just. The people feared him, but they respected him. He strengthened the kingdom's borders, crushed rebellions, and built a fleet of ships that could threaten far-off coasts. He dreamed larger than Norway. He dreamed of Denmark, of England, of a Norse empire rising from the foam of the sea. Many winters passed, and Harald's name was spoken with both reverence and dread. He was called Hardrada, the hard ruler, because his decisions never wavered. He was a king who knew what he wanted, and he took it. Yet even as age laid silver in his hair, his heart still burned with fire. Then came the message that ignited his final dream. In England, King Edward the Confessor had died, and Harald Godwinson had seized the crown. But Harald Hardrada believed he had a rightful claim to England's throne. Through old treaties, through blood and honor, he declared the crown his. And so he gathered his ships, his warriors, his jarls, and set sail westward. Like a dark storm, the Norwegian host swept across the sea. They landed in northern England, and their victory followed victory. At Fulford, Harold, together with Tostig Godwinson, Harold's own brother, crushed an English army. The triumph was complete, and the road to York lay open. Harald Hardrada, the Viking who had traveled the world, now stood at the gates of his greatest prize. But fate awaited him at Stamford Bridge. On September 25, 1066, Harold and his men marched toward the city, lighthearted after Fulford's victory, many without armor, believing no enemy would come so swiftly. Yet Harold Godwinson had advanced with his army at furious speed. At the bridge over the River Derwent, the Norsemen saw the dust rising from the south. The battle that followed became legend. Harald Hardrada, tall and mighty, bore his sword as though he were Thor's own son. He surged forward, sagas say he fought at the very front, fearless, a lightning bolt in human form. Arrows rained down, shields splintered, but Harold held the line. He fought with the power only a man born for greatness could wield. Then an arrow struck his throat. The last great Viking fell, not as a coward, but as a king in the heart of battle. Around him, his warriors fought to the last breath, and Stamford Bridge became a grave for hundreds of Norsemen. Only a handful of ships returned to Norway. Harald Hardrada's life was ended, but his name was carved into eternity. He had journeyed farther than most Vikings, fought in more battles than any king of his time, and carried the dream of a Norse empire until his final day. His fall marked the end of the Viking Age. With his blood soaking the grass at Stamford Bridge, an era closed, and a legend was born. For even now, when storms tear along Norway's coasts, the wind still whispers of Harald Hardrada. Of the boy who became king, of the warrior who became legend, and of the last great Viking who never turned back, even when death stood before him.